Hi, this is Rob. I'm going to be showing you how to do the exercises that go along with the video lesson, finding a percent of a number. Are you ready? Let's get started. Our first problem is what is 20% of 60? Now you'll need to remember from the video that with percentages as well as fractions, when you see of, you should think multiply. So let's rewrite this as 20%, let me get that 2 better, 20% times 60. All right, so the first thing we need to do to multiply these is to write them both in their fraction form. And a percentage is just a fraction with 100 as their bottom number. So 20 over 100 is the same value as 20%, and multiplied. And for 60, the fraction form of 60 is 60 over 1, because you can put 1 as the bottom number in a fraction for any whole number, and it doesn't change the value. All right, so now we just multiply the top numbers. So 20 times 60 equals 1,200. And then we multiply the bottom numbers. 100 times 1 equals 100. All right, and now I'm going to show you how to simplify this. And luckily, both the top and bottom numbers have zeros as the final digits in the numbers. And when you simplify fractions, what you're doing is canceling common factors. And when a number ends with a 0, that means that it has a factor of 10. So like 1,200 is exactly the same as 12 times 10 times 10. And 100 is the same as 10 times 10. And just so there's something left over when we cancel it, I'll put in the 1 times 10 times 10. All right, and so now when we cancel the common factors, we're left with 12 over 1. But you can also just cross off the zeros, as long as you only cross off the same number on the top and the bottom. There, so we cross 2 off the top and 2 off the bottom, and they have to be the digits on the very far right of the number. You can't cross it out of the middle of a number. All right, so now we have 12 over 1. 12 over 1. And remember, any fraction with 1 as the bottom number can be rewritten as a whole number by just taking 1 off the bottom. So 20% of 60 is 12. For our next problem, we need to find 4% of 25. So once again, this of means multiply. So let's write it that way. 4% times 25. And once again, we'll write them both in their fraction form. 4 over 100 times 25 over 1. And then we just multiply. 4 times 25, we multiply the top numbers. 4 times 25 is 100. Then multiply the bottom numbers. 100 times 1 is 100. And it's pretty clear that this is a whole fraction. It has 100 as the top number and as the bottom number. And any fraction with the same top and bottom number is a whole fraction and equals 1. So 4% of 25 is 1. And now we need to find 5% of 80. And 5% of 80 means 5% times 80. So now let's rewrite them in their fraction form. So we have 5 over 100 times 80 over 1. All right. And now we will multiply these fractions together. So we multiply the top numbers. 5 times 80 is 400. And 100 times 1 is 100. All right, and so now we can simplify this fraction. And so we can just cancel out the zeros on the top and bottom, just as long as it's the same number. All right, and so now we're left with 4 over 1. So let's write it like that, 4 over 1. And that simplifies, so it equals 4. Those are 4 over 1 and 4 is the same value. So 5% of 80 equals 4. And now we have the question, what is 30% of 20? So let's write it as the multiplication problem. 30% of 20 is the same as 30% times 20. And we'll and we'll write the fraction form of these numbers. 30 over 100 is 30% times 20 over 1. And then we'll multiply these fractions. We'll start by multiplying the top numbers together. So 30 times 20 equals 600. 100 times 1 equals 100. And then we can simplify this fraction by canceling off the zeros that are on the right side of the number. And that leaves us with 6 over 1. So let's just write that, 6 over 1. And that simplifies to 6, because 1 as the bottom number of a fraction is the same as that number by itself. So 30% of 20 equals 6. And now we have the question, what is 80% of 150? And for this problem, we can use a calculator. So we're going to use the decimal method of finding the percent of a number. But we'll still rewrite it as a multiplication problem. So we know what's going on. 80% times 150, because remember, of means multiply when dealing with percentages and fractions. So we have 80% of 150. So now, instead of writing it in its fraction form, we're going to write it in its decimal form. You take the number, the percentage, and you move the decimal point 2 spaces to the left. So there's not a decimal point written, but there's, at the end of a whole number, you can always imagine that there's a decimal point there. So we're going to move that 2 spaces to the left, right here. So that puts it in front of the 8. So we'll put a 0.8. 0.8 times 150 equals, and now is where the calculator comes in. So 0.8 times 150 equals 120. Put that in as our answer. So 80% of 150 is 120. And now we have what is 45% of 32. And once again, we get to use a calculator. So we'll be doing the decimal method. All right, so let's rewrite it as a multiplication problem. 45% times 32. And now we'll write it in its decimal form. Remember, we just moved the decimal point 2 digits to the left. Puts it right there. So we'll write it as 0.45 times 32 equals, all right, and so now we can use the calculator. So let's put that in there. 0.45 times 32 equals 14.4. And you have to be very careful that you don't miss the decimal point on a calculator. Sometimes it can be hard to see. So 45% of 32 equals 14.4. And this time we have a word problem. We have, your class has 28 students. If 25% of them play soccer, how many students play soccer? All right. So the important thing to do in a word problem is figure out what the question being asked is. Now, the main question is how many students play soccer? And then we see from right above it, if 25% of them play soccer, so 25% of some amount play soccer. So let's write down that part. So far, we know that 25% of them play soccer. Them, let's see, your class has 28 students. So them is referring to the 28 students. So 25% of 28 is how many students play soccer. All right? So now let's rewrite it as a multiplication problem. 25% times 28. And we can use our calculator. So we're going to use the decimal form. And the decimal form of 25%, remember, move the decimal point 2 digits to the left, is 0.25 times 28 equals, all right, so now we'll put that in the calculator, 0.25 times 28 equals 7. So 25% of 28 equals 7. And how many students play soccer? equals 7. And here we have another word problem. We have a game you want is on sale for 15% off. If the regular price is $50, how much will you save? So the main question is how much will you save? So we want to know this 15% off of the regular price, which is $50, how much we'll save. So the 15% of 50 is how much we'll save. All right, so let's write that down. We have 15% of $50. So we'll rewrite it as a multiplication problem. So we have 15%. And for these steps in here, I won't write the $, times 50. And since we can use our calculator, we're going to use a decimal method. So move it the decimal point 2 digits to the left, starting with a 0, 0.15 times 50 equals, all right, so 0.15, 0.15 times 50 equals 7.5, 7.5. And so it seems like this is our final answer, but we're talking about dollars and cents here. So the amount we'll save is $7.50.